All right, it says we're live. Hey, everybody watching. Hope you all can hear us.
Hey, Jeff McKinney.
Let us know.
Hey, YouTube.
Let us know if you can see us so we don't have another of those incidents.
The incident.
All right. Let's see. So you're thinking wine label and I think that's a decent.
Yeah. Hey, give me a second.
Yeah. Okay.
One. You're not back. Cut them off.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
I would say we're normally more professional than this, Alan, but
No, this is us.
You guys seem great from my perspective.
all right. Let's see. What are we talking about tonight? Did we hear from YouTube? Can they see us, Jeff?
Can you guys see us? Say something other than hi. They're all saying hi to each other.
So they're already ignoring us.
What's that?
I ordered it and it said out of stock.
Oh, cool. Well, nice. We got a hardcover. Sorry.
Something Bed Bath & Beyond. You can't pick it up curbside. You got to wait for it to come in the mail.
Actually, the hard copy of White Fragility just showed up at our house.
Nice.
She was like, I forgot I ordered this a couple of weeks ago. Like, I just bought the audiobook, you jerk.
Can you return an audiobook?
Oh, hold to it. Okay. Labeling wine ingredients. What's up, Jeff?
You never. Okay. Rhett said he can see us. All right, so I guess we're good. You didn't.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
Promo. Promo.
Working on it. Well, Alan, one thing we ask everybody that comes on the show if they would mind doing a promo for us.
Oh, no problem. Sure.
So generally, what people say is, "Hey, this is Allan Roth with Glenfiddich. You're listening to the We Like Drinking podcast, where you never drink alone." And then play on that however you like, riff that, whatever you want to do. And we're recording right now, so anytime you're ready, just feel free to go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Allan Roth with Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whisky, and we are here with the We Like Drinking podcast, where you never drink alone.
Boom. Like a pro.
Yes.
I mean, I think I could do better, but I also kind of want to be one take Allan, you know?
Yeah.
There you go. You nailed it.
And that just became your name. All right. Anything else we need to talk about, guys, or are we good to go? YouTube is lit up.
Yeah.
All right.
Methel's in here talking about gun control, John.
Let's not get started. That's a whole different We Like podcast.
Yeah, they're watching the wrong podcast.
Yeah. I think they're doing a live show right now too. So
I think they are. Or they started an hour ago.
yeah. Theirs is a little bit more rambunctious than ours. All right. Grandma sees us as well. So
Okay.
all right, I'm recording. We're live on YouTube. We've got everybody. Yeah, let's do this. Here we go.
Press the button.
Hey, this is Annie Pouch with Brew Cruise, Santa Cruz's microbrewery tour. I am on We Like Drinking podcast, where you never drink alone.
At the sound of the tone, the official We Like Drinking time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 282 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing wine ingredient labeling, whiskey, and we're discussing whiskey cocktails with One Take, Allan Roth from Glenfiddich. So crack open your beers, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking! All right, even the intro was even messed up, and I got through it, Jeff Solomon. That's first time in 282 episodes. That's a good thing.
So
Somehow, some way, we did it.
So Alan, hi Alan, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
So I was watching a YouTube video today about how to pronounce Glenfiddich. Not Fiddich, it'll make a Scotsman's blood boil.
That's
Am I
right.
right?
That's right.
I'm already messing everything up. I noticed we were like 10 seconds in and the bottle was already pouring for Alan. So I think he already realizes what he's in for.
I felt like I was behind. 5 o'clock just came in the announcements. I didn't want to be too tardy.
That's right. There you go. All right. Well, let me start off by saying cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 282 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine and spirit education podcast focusing on fun.
Fun!
John, anything?
Fun.
Oh, you're just
F.
making this with
F-
your hand.
F for
Perfect
fun.
podcasting. So make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikedrinking.com/subscribe. All right, you've heard everybody talking, but let's introduce them and find out what they're drinking. We're joined by our usual panel members. We have our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Hello. Ooh.
We have our commercial brewer and snake wrangler, John Ruyak.
Hey folks.
And I am your host and certified specialist of wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week is the brand ambassador for Glenfiddich Scotch Whisky. He's a formerly trained teacher and researcher who focuses on the human elements of production and processes that go into creating the award-winning flavors you'll find in every glass of Glenfiddich. Please help us welcome Allan Roth. Welcome to the show, Allan.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
So happy to have you on the show. This is going to be an exciting one. I'm excited to hear what you do and what you're drinking. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start off. You know what? We're going to start off with Allan, the guest of honor. What's in your glass tonight, good sir?
So in my glass right here, I have the Glenfiddich 12-year. This is our signature single malt Scotch whiskey, and for me, it's just the one I keep finding myself coming back to time and time again.
And how are you drinking it tonight?
Tonight I'm drinking it neat. Just from a Glencairn glass, just really for me the best way to kind of sip and savor. Sometimes I'll put a drop or two of water in there, but really just kind of like it the way that our malt master Brian Kinsman puts it into the bottle.
Awesome. John Ruyak.
So I don't have any Glenfiddich, but I do have a couple of bottles of scotch, and one of them happens to be Oban. And of all the what they consider the classic single malts, I've always considered Oban to be kind of the simplest, but it seems like it pours really well. I just have not even a dram. I'm just going to do that, and because I'm going back to work on Monday, yay! The breweries open back up on Monday. Sharon opened a bottle of Brut Rosé from Grouet last week and had 2 glasses of it. And this stopper does a phenomenal job.
It does really well, doesn't it?
And so I'm going to put a dent in that before it has to go down the drain. I don't think I'll finish it, but so yeah, got some scotch for our guests, and I've got some celebratory sparkling rosé from the great state of New Mexico.
Excellent. Jeff Solomon.
I find it interesting. We got two gentlemen that started out drinking scotch out of some beautifully etched crystal. So, oh dear, I'm just going to have to follow that up. I too am drinking scotch neat out of some nice crystal. I never buy crystal. It just shows up at my house. So here we go. And you're wondering what it is? Well, my dear, it's the Glenfiddich 12-year. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's it.
All right, I'm gonna break the trend. I went to get something today. I was actually gonna have wine tonight, and then I was walking by the cooler, and what did I see? But out of Decorah, Iowa, I have some Pseudo Sue
Oh, look at that.
pale ale that I'm drinking. So I knew it had been in Colorado, but I had not been able to find it until tonight. So I just had to grab a 4-pack of that. So that is what I will be sipping on tonight, and I will be jealous of the three of you for the rest of the evening.
Let me ask you real quick about that Pseudo Sue. That is just a straight up pale ale, correct? Or
Yes.
is it IPA?
It's a pale ale, but it's
in that like Sierra Nevada pale ale IPA style.
it tastes like to me it's an IPA, but
good stuff.
it's really good stuff. It's really good. Now you can find Allan on Instagram at Glenfiddich AR, and you can also find Glenfiddich on Instagram at Glenfiddich US. Is that the one that people should be following? There's like 3 of them. The US seemed to be the official one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Glenfiddich US is where you're going to find all the information about what's going on in the US for the brand and US and now Canada specific expressions like the Glenfiddich 14-year Bourbon Barrel Reserve. So definitely the best place to be.
Excellent. All right. That's it for getting to know everybody. Oh, look at all you guys sipping on your scotches.
I mean, we've got some quality liquid in the glass tonight. I mean,
this is so good. I may change my Twitter handle to Glenfiddich AF.
Jeff, why don't you give us a little insight into what you're drinking, into the Glenfiddich there?
Okay, so this is the 12-year. It's got this beautiful golden color, and on the nose, don't be afraid to jam your nose in the hard alcohol. Like, relax. You know what you're getting into. There's this nice spicy and like caramel note on the nose. There's like some dried fruits, like some dried apricot on there on the nose as well. And the palate for me, obviously, there's this nice like spicy driven notes. There's like some baked apple, some puff pastry, again with those like dried fruits as well. It's fruity and nutty and savory. It's weird. I feel like over the last 2 months on this show, we're kind of getting a crash course in the booze. And one of the things I always think about is like food pairings. And I swear to you, it's almost like, why wouldn't you? When you look it up, you're going to see things like chocolate and nuts and dried fruits and cheeses. And sure enough, that's exactly what I would love to have with this. Like some aged cheddar, I think would go great. This is beautiful. It's been a while since I've had a Glenfiddich in my glass, and I am super stoked on it. So anyone who you try to do that swingers thing at the bar, you're like, any Glen, there's differences, guys. There's differences.
Excellent. Did he hit it, Allan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nervous about my job security now. So, no, really well done, and I agree with you on the pairings. It really makes me want to hit all those things as well.
Awesome. All right, Solomon, we've been letting you talk. I guess we'll just keep letting you talk as we get into a bit we like to call
wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference. This is where I am going to give our panel a term, and they have to tell us, is this a wine, a beer, a spirit, or a pop culture reference? And I'm just going to go like down the row from top to bottom. The term for me, from my view, the term this week is Dufftown. Is Dufftown a wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference? John Ruyak, Dufftown.
Well, isn't that where Duff beer is made? I'm gonna say it's a pop culture reference. I stole
John
Eccles'
Ruyak.
answer.
John Ruyak right off the bat, just like sniping Eccles. I almost feel like you're pulling like the Cody Fuller in a fantasy draft type of thing right there. Like you knew.
I just snaked that right out from under him.
Yeah. So, okay. Ruyak is saying it's a pop culture reference having to do with Duff beer. Is that actually at this point even still a fictional beer, or is it like reality? I think it might exist, by the way, but
it may exist.
All right. Jeff Eccles.
Yeah, I damn you, Ruyak. So Dufftown, can you please spell it for us?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Dufftown.
Oh shit!
So
I would
not like
never
it
guess that.
sounds. Yeah, Dufftown.
One word or two?
It's one word.
Okay. All right. I will also say that this is a pop culture reference. I think there's some celebrity that has the last name of Duff, like Hillary Duff.
Hillary Duff.
And it's next to Area 51, and it's a pop-up little city that has sprung up in honor of Hillary Duff, and it is Dufftown.
An RV camper city.
Yes.
On your way to Area 51, there's a restaurant you're saying called Dufftown.
It's a little tent city. It's where all the Kyles go. Preparing to storm Area 51. They're a little late, but they're still there. They've got their Nuratu runs going. They're out practicing.
The tagline for the town is, "You can't stop us all, but when you need a break, stop at Dufftown."
Stop at Dufftown.
Allan, before we get into your answer, I do just want to say that if this was asked of me, I would have said that Dufftown was that band, that one hit wonder they did. Come my lady, come my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar baby. I think it was Dufftown. But Allan,
don't they have a Greek chorus in that song, "Screaming Murder Hornets"?
It's remarkable that even when you're the MC of something, you still get to give an answer. Like,
well, yeah, that's how I do it. But Allan, what do you think it might be? Dufftown, does it ring any bells?
Well, it sure does. If you're from Dufftown, you might even call it Duffton, but there is both pronunciations are acceptable. But I like to live in a world where everyone can be right. So if you're really into Scotch whiskey production and you're really focused on, especially early 20th century or 19th century spirits production, you might talk about the 7 stills of Dufftown, which were some of the best known Scotch whiskey distilleries of their time. So I think we can all be right. I think it can be, because it's also, I should say, most importantly, where Glenfiddich is made, and the town where our founder, William Grant, was born. And so it very much is a single malt Scotch whiskey, it's a spirit term. But really, it's really part of the popular culture of, not just Dufftown, not just Speyside, not just Scotland, but really, folks who are really into this stuff like we are.
Yeah, that's awesome. The word again, come my lady, come. It's Dufftown. It's a spirit.
Well done, everyone. Well done. All right. We've gotten through all the shenanigans. So I think we can get to the interview. Welcome to the show, Allan. We're only, 20 minutes in, and now we can finally start talking to you. We don't like to run like every other show on the planet does. So thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. So brand ambassador, Glenfiddich, give us the you've given us a little bit of the background of Glenfiddich, but give us the high end your high end thoughts and ideas on Glenfiddich.
Sure. So, I mean, we are a family-owned and operated distillery, and have been for 5 going on 6 generations. And unlike a lot of other distilleries of our time that were founded by really wealthy men who might start a single malt Scotch whiskey distillery the way that a tech billionaire might buy a sports franchise, that wasn't our story at all. Our founder, William Grant, was originally trained as a cobbler. That wasn't for him, and he spent about 20 years working for another distillery in Dufftown, working his way up to distillery manager. And the whole time that he was doing this, he, his 7 sons, 2 daughters, and his wife were all contributing to the kind of the family dream of starting their own distillery. So everybody would, who was out in the world working would send money back or in some way contribute to this family project, to the point where eventually the family had saved up several £100s, which is the money that they used to start the distillery. They bought their still secondhand from another Speyside distillery before they even had the land to build on, and then were quite savvy in the land that they chose. Picked one with a really plentiful pure water source that we know as the Robbie Dew Spring, or the Black Robert Spring, and the rest, we say, is history. We've gone on to become not just the world's most awarded single malt, but the first to export single malt as single malt outside of Scotland back in 1963. So really, we introduced the world to this concept that you can have a whiskey that is, just from this one distillery, so the single, and that is made entirely from malted barley, which is incredibly flavorful. So that's the single and the malt. And so, we're quite proud to not just make one of the best single malt Scotch whiskies in the world, but to have really introduced the world to the category as a whole.
That's amazing. Now, when we talk about Allan Roth, this is quite the combo here. You were a teacher at one point, yes?
I was originally, yeah, my first job, yeah.
And a researcher, and now you're in the whiskey game. So tell us how that has all transpired.
Sure. Well, I think the easy joke here is that teaching drives one to drink.
Yeah.
I cannot relate to that.
But really, it was actually much more accidental than that. After graduating college, I did Teach for America and taught in rural Louisiana. I lived in Baton Rouge and crossed the Mississippi and several bayous to get to my school in the morning, which is in the middle of a sugarcane field. Roosters would crow. And I taught for 2 years and was really interested and committed to issues of social justice. I went and did most of a PhD in political science at Columbia in order to kind of learn more about that. Went on to actually teach teachers for a while after that, but kept kind of hearing this siren song of spirits and how they were made and the world that they exist in. And cocktail culture was making its comeback when I was living in New York City, and kind of one day just said, I'm gonna take a pause from this career path, and I went to go work at a now shuttered but really storied American whiskey bar and restaurant in Brooklyn called Char Number 4, and what I thought was going to be a temporary exploration turned into a decade-long career. So it's been really positive for me. I never knew that I could enjoy something that most people consider a diversion as a career.
That's great. John Riak.
I have several questions, but we were talking before the show, and I maybe want to dive in just a little bit about the product itself. We had talked about some barley growing issues in the UK, and I mentioned a particular kind of barley that Glenfiddich used to use, Golden Promise. We have talked to some bourbon producers where they contract with a specific corn grower for that particular hybrid of corn. Is that the same kind of thing that happens at Glenfiddich?
So in that case, we're more likely to work with our maltsters and let them know what we want them to purchase and malt for us. And we'll give them the specifications that we know is going to translate into, the character in our new make spirit, and then the character of our finished whiskey. We will from time to time change the barley varietal. And that's just kind of a natural part of the agricultural process. Over time, we'll find that maybe a specific strain will lose its resistance to pests, or the folks that are kind of growing the new strains will find one that produces an even better yield than what we're working with. And so from time to time, we're going to say, hey, what do you have? And then we'll play around with it.
Nice. So, I mean, a lot of times, and I've talked to barley growers when I was in Costa Rica. We had a lot of people from Central Canada come down and spoke to a gentleman that was actually a barley grower. And he had always wanted to get his barley in for making beer because he loved beer so much. But he had trouble growing his barley to keep it at the proper nitrogen level within the germ. So, I mean, those requirements are pretty tight. You just don't grow barley. Not everything can be malted in a way that produces good beer or good whiskey. So that's cool that you kind of change things up and move things along.
Yeah. Talking about barley wasn't what I did when I was in Costa Rica, but I feel like maybe I missed out on the full vacation experience. So I mean, just egg on my face. But no, that's a really great point, and we're constantly looking at those specifications. The nitrogen level. For having the right starch level. Even as small as the way that the barley cracks when we grind it down, they all seem like they're these tiny little things that shouldn't matter in the long run, but they're incredibly important for this process.
Oh yeah, I have to adjust our mill all the time depending on whether the grain is German or Belgian or American Canadian. The way the kernels. The diameter of the kernels change. And when you're talking about 64ths of an inch, that's a big deal on your crush. So that's, you wouldn't think about those things, but that's important.
Jeff Solomon.
Obviously, we're all
we
locked.
actually just expanded that Glenfiddich.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please. I felt like I just stepped all over a punchline there.
No. That's okay. I forgot what the hell I was gonna. Oh yeah. So, Allan, I know we're on lockdown, but outside of the lockdown world, how often are they shipping you back to Dufton to see what's going on over there?
So usually I go at least once a year. I've gone a little bit higher than that on average. I was really lucky a couple of years ago to have gone to Scotland 3 times. It was great. I went once to study for the GCD, or the General Certificate of Distilling. Passed. I went back again for the Glenfiddich Global Ambassador Workshop, which is usually held at the distillery every year. And one more time. So really, it's like voting in Chicago early and often is my strategy for Scotland. But it's really it's the most important part for me, because we have a really dedicated and talented set of men and women, you know, working to make this whiskey day in, day out. And if I were to come and talk about it without knowing them and spending time with them and building friendships with them, I don't think I'd be able to do my job in the same way. You know, and it's what makes it especially meaningful, right? You know, there are so many distilleries out there, but my relationship with Glenfiddich will always be special because of the relationship with the people as well as my relationship with the liquid in the bottle.
So
Nice.
reestablishing that connection.
But yeah, the shipping is difficult, you know.
So
am I not coming through too clear?
No, you're coming through fine. You're just on like a 2-second delay. So it's a little slow getting it to us. So we're just kind of pausing when you get done just to make sure that you're done. And
done.
so that's why. And it's
would it be worthwhile for me to
go ahead?
Would it be worthwhile for me to switch over to a hardwired connection and have the break in the actual podcast right here, or is that not going to work? If you guys don't mind waiting a moment.
Yeah.
But if this works as is with the delay, we can just stick with it.
No, if you can, because I think we've stepped on each other a couple times. If you can switch, and you'll probably just have to sign back in, but that's no big deal.
Yeah, you lose me for a minute or two, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
all right, cool.
Thanks, Alan. I don't know if you guys were having trouble with it, but it was
Yeah, there was that lag where I was like, "Oh, is he going to say something else?"
right. And then we start talking, and he's trying to tell us a story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just went over and I'm looking at the chat. Rhett, not that I have to have it, but yeah, we can get our hair cut here in Colorado, but not our beards. Can't get any shaves.
Interesting. Is that a thing? Like people would go get somebody else shave their beard for them? I mean, I know that exists.
Just like in
but
just like in the Old West, you go to Colorado and they sharpen it up on the leather strap, and
they do the hot towel and the
brush on leather. Yeah,
Hot foam. Oh yeah.
the weird like RoboCop glove to give you a massage at the end.
No, not that.
Get away from me, old man.
Oh, I splurge every now and then. I'll get the straight raised shave.
You know you're at a quality barber shop when you look in the window and there's like a faded cardboard stand selling hand combs, and the combs have dust on them.
That's how you know.
Yeah, that's how you know you've come to the right place.
so you have to make sure they let you dip it in the barbicide.
Oh man,
Everybody's talking lockdown too over in the chat.
they are. I'm sore. Was it?
From the lockdown.
It was probably no. I'm not sore from lockdown. I think I told you guys last time I saw you when we were recording on Sunday. I had recently like fallen on my skateboard, and the way that I fell, like my left elbow drove my ribs like into my chest. Like, and I heard a crunch. It wasn't good. It didn't feel good. And I've just been insanely sore, like just pain radiating from my shoulder through my shoulder blade into my sternum. I ain't going to a hospital.
No.
F that.
So, you guys know I've thrown my back out a number of times.
Yeah.
And I'll go to a chiropractor, and it helps a little bit, but not great. The last time I went to the chiropractor for the last time I hurt my back, they're like, "Do you want to try some dry needling?" I'm like, I don't care. Whatever, I'll try whatever you got. And it's similar to acupuncture, but it's like different needles that they use. And he's like tapping it in and wiggling it around and everything. And he did it. He did the spiel, and he pulls them all out, and he's got this big handful. He's like, "These were all on your back." I'm like, "Cool. I don't feel any better, dude." And he's like, He's like, "Okay, here, bend over." I'm like, "Wait." And he's like, "No." So, and he's like, "Where does it hurt?" And I was kind of pointing out where it was at, and he was like, "Okay." And he tried it a couple more times. The pain was just gone. It just disappeared. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it didn't last, but it like gave me relief for a good through that rest of that day. So
Dry needling, much better than a good dry noodling, which is he's done, and he holds his hand out, and there's a catfish, and you're like, what? What just happened? This was in your back.
So maybe see if that's something in your area, Solomon.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Methel says that it sounds like you're too old for skateboarding.
Go play some hockey.
Once all this shit's over, man, I gotta find a way to get back on the ice.
I haven't been on in years.
I haven't been since Costa Rica, so it's been almost 6.
You know, I used to play slow pitch softball like every night once a week, every like Thursday night for fucking like 8 years. And then I took one season off and I never came back. I was like, I'm good. I don't need dudes the size of the NFL linemen like hitting line drives past my head.
To be down.
Hey, Allan.
Hey guys, bad news. I can't even hardwire in right now. I think the lag is because I'm over the cellular connection. Unfortunately, things seem to have gone down here in Silver Lake, LA.
Oh, okay.
Oh, dude.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Okay. Time-ish. Okay, 34. All right, let's see. Jeff, you just asked a question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to go quiet for just a minute. All right, and then that's great. So Allan, you still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yep.
So Allan, speaking of being in Scotland, speaking of tastings, you have a special event coming up here in a week or so in cyberspace. Is that? Can you tell our listeners what that is and how they can attend if that's possible?
There are so many. Can you help me narrow it down? Actually, I have a couple of things coming up.
There's a virtual tasting of 1 ounce pours at a virtual tour of Glenfiddich. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right. Sorry, there were a couple. I didn't want to speak to the wrong one to which you were alluding. Yeah, so I'm doing actually a couple of tastings with the Los Angeles Scotch Club, and each one has a number of special drams. We have a recreation of actually that first whiskey that we would have sent over to the U.S. back in 1963. The one next week is also featuring a 33-year cask from 1973. So the one that wasn't even bottled that recently anymore. That's really kind of the star of the evening. And it wasn't that long ago that casks like that bottles from casks like that would go for maybe a few $100s, but now it's those are well into the 4 figures. So it's going to be a really special evening, both in terms of rarity value and frankly, I think between 30 ambassadors talking between 30 and 50 is a really nice age point for Glenfiddich. So
yeah.
If you don't need the new car or to send your car out it's a great decision.
And then did I see accurately that you have your own blend in there or something like that?
Oh, No, no, but you actually brought up a topic that it's a little bit like a paper cut with some lemon juice in the wound. One of the great things about the family ownership of the distillery is that our malt master is really allowed to experiment in some really fun ways, and we decided to institutionalize that about 5 years ago with the Glenfiddich experimental series, and I won't go into all of the expressions, but given the crowd here, the first was the first single malt Scotch whiskey finished in IPA casks. But the second is the one that's a little bit of a touchy subject for me. It was called Project 20. And basically every ambassador on that conference I was talking about before went over to Scotland, got let loose in the warehouse, and got to pick their favorite cask. And it yielded 17 bourbon barrels, 2 sherry butts, and 1 port pipe. Which our malt master then combined to make a really beautiful, higher ABV, non-chill filtered expression of Glenfiddich. And I was not yet an ambassador for Glenfiddich, so I missed out on the experience of getting to choose one of those. So yeah, I do not have a private cask at the distillery as much as I would like to say that I do.
All right, John.
So that's a perfect segue into one of the questions that I had. So this is kind of a two-part question. We had Brent Elliott on from Four Roses, the distiller, the malt master at Four Roses, and I was talking about how long you should keep a bottle around before you should finish it. And his take was less than a quarter full, you just need to bear down and finish it because you're starting to lose aromatics into the space in the bottle. Yep. Is that similar with Scotch?
Yeah, I mean, the principles are going to more or less be the same between the two. I mean, we're operating in such a high proof space that I don't think there's going to be that much difference between the two. And frankly, I'm inclined to follow the master distiller from Four Roses on that. I'm not going to stake a different position there. No, but I agree. I think that for me, it's it's really also about just the ratio of surface area compared to how much liquid you have, because it will oxidize. So I remember being at a bar in Brooklyn where I used to live, and someone had poured me basically they didn't have enough left in the bottle, and it was Elmer T. Lee, so it was a particularly kind of broad bottle, and it was actually an amazing experience because I'd never had an over-oxidized whiskey before. I'd had stuff that sat in the bottle for decades, but always with a really good fill. I'd never had something that sat on the shelf for several years, or maybe for several months at maybe a quarter inch left. So that was really educational, but not necessarily enjoyable.
So my second part to that question is then this: as school teachers and IT professionals and brewers, we don't make a boatload of money, but it sure would be nice to there's no way I could spend $320 some odd for the 23-year-old Grand Cru or $600 for the 30-year. But if you got together with 5 or 6 guys and paid $100 for a bottle of Scotch, you really would probably want to finish it that night so that you would remember it as awesome as it is and not see it fade over time.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we talk about it, let's say you split it with 5 friends, you're getting about 5 ounces. So that's like, 2.5 glasses or maybe 5, nosing sessions. I don't know you guys that well, but I don't think 5 ounces of whiskey is going to last that long in anyone's house, among this group here.
No.
So I don't know if you need to finish it that night, but I think that, our palates are so different from day to day, and even from different times in the day. I would say spread it out over a week, That being said, there is something that's very invigorating, powerful about drinking a lot of expensive whiskey in one sitting. So I don't want to tell you to not do that, because you can feel like a baller. It's a great way to be.
And the stories that you will be telling people about that night, they're gonna last forever, and that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And then also, and be responsible. So the three folks drinking scotch tonight on the show are drinking it neat. A lot of times, and this is not an uncommon question that I've brought up with other booze folks, but I just want to get your opinion on this. A lot of times you'll get folks drinking, scotch on the rocks, maybe with just a little bit of water. Some people might put a lot of water in it. Do you have any particular take or inkling for like trying different types of cocktails with Glenfiddich?
Yeah, I really do, firmly believe that single malt Scotch whiskey should be used in cocktails. And it's one of the most, if not the most, flavorful whiskey around. It's made in an incredibly artisanal process. And the last time I ever heard a bartender say to me that they wanted to work with something that wasn't artisanally made and that wasn't really flavorful was never. So really this is kind of the myth that we shouldn't use single malt Scotch whiskey in cocktails. Is really almost like a myth, not necessarily of our own making at Glenfiddich, but really of the industry. If we were the first to bring it over in '63, the industry is less than 60 years old. And one of the ways that we really communicated with consumers early on that it was something really special to be celebrated was really focusing on drinking it alone. And I think it's safe to say that message has been delivered. And so now that people are aware of the care and the craftsmanship that goes into creating a really flavorful whiskey, now is the time where people won't think it's less than because we're putting it into a cocktail. And I have some memories of hanging out with a cognac ambassador in a bar in New York City where we were making the bartenders were making for us some really incredible whiskey cognac cocktails with Glenfiddich and his brand, and it was both a very expensive and very enjoyable evening. So I say, especially actually the 14-year that I'm drinking now, it's finished in new bourbon barrels. It's amazing in an old fashioned. I say go for it. Drink with the highest quality ingredients you can afford, cocktail or not.
Makes sense. And that's one of your roles, right? Is you kind of lead the creation of Glenfiddich cocktails, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I was in New York, that was definitely a huge part of my role, and I still contribute to that. But right now, I actually have several colleagues who are incredible mixologists as well, and so now I actually have to say that it's really a team effort. We bring a really varied set of bar and drink making experiences. But that is one of my key roles for the team is kind of developing new cocktails for our old and new expressions.
So with Glenfiddich, what goes into making a great cocktail? What are some key factors?
So I think it's really kind of listening to the spirit. So that's going to really be two different sides. So for Glenfiddich, our new make spirit coming off the still is really kind of redolent fresh pear, maybe some fresh cut grass, some fresh citrus, and that distillery character, as we call it, is what makes Glenfiddich. And so we always have to listen to that when putting a cocktail together. But then the other part is really the casks that the whiskey that the Glenfiddich was aged or finished in. So, for instance, our 12-year is a little bit lighter and brighter. It's great in sours, in highballs, in fizzes. The 14-year with that new bourbon barrel finish is great in American whiskey cocktails. And then our 15-year has a lot more European oak influence, like a lot, that dried fruit, kind of concentrated, kind of baked fruit notes that you were picking up in the 12-year. It's on steroids in the 15. And that works really well in aromatic stirred cocktails like a Rob Roy. And so it's really, listening to the distillery character, but then also, paying a lot of attention to the influence of the oak, which, adds up to, almost 2/3, maybe even 70% of the flavor in a finished single malt.
So I find myself, even today, intimidated by Scotch in general, right? I find myself gravitating towards a Glenfiddich, maybe because I'm familiar with the brand, right? And maybe because I see in tasting notes, just it's more indicative to the region. You're not getting a whole lot of peat in there. And I was just wondering if we can we all just proclaim to like all the other like Scotch distillers, whoever this guy Pete is, could you please not put him inside of the still? It's just not nice.
Well, I think this is a difficult and polarizing conversation that we're about to have. But yeah, I mean, so the barley that we're using, as we talked about before, it's malted, which means it's tricked into starting to grow, and we have to stop that process so that we can make whiskey and not more barley plants. So we have to dry it over some heat source, and Scotland does not have tons of trees, and so they used what they had, which was peat, which for the listeners that don't know, is basically just partially decomposed vegetable matter. So it's somewhere in between a fresh plant and a piece of coal. And so it burns really inefficiently, creates all this smoke that attaches to the barley, and stays throughout the process, giving us smoky, peaty whiskeys. Yeah, I see where you stand on this. Even though 99% of Glenfiddich is not peated, does not have that smoke, I have to say that I do like it when it comes around. Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, it depends on where you get that Scotch from too. I mean, if you get it from what Lagavulin is Islay, which is that peated malt has a lot of iodine in it from the ocean, so you get some iodine overtones in the Scotch. So that's kind of how the malt is done is kind of like the hops in beer. It what gives those particular regions and those distilleries their distinctions.
Absolutely, and John, you really set me up for one of my favorite bits here. So it turns out that the peat from Islay has this kind of family of chemicals called orthocreosols, which are give it that iodine aroma. And it turns out that these molecules help things dissolve in other things. So they're actually used a lot to help disinfectants dissolve into liquids that you might use to, say, disinfect the floor of a hospital, or put on a Band-Aid, which is amazing because so many people come to Scotch whiskey and they'll have an Islay malt and they'll say, why does this Scotch taste like Band-Aids? But the thing is, we've been making whiskey for way longer than we've been making Band-Aids. The real question is, why do my Band-Aids smell like Scotch?
Yes.
I think anybody that needs to have a Band-Aid put on by a professional at some time needs to ask that question. Why do all these Band-Aids smell like Scotch? And just
as long as the doctor's not saying that while he's putting it on, I think
right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Somebody needs to inspect that factory at Johnson & Johnson. So, Allan, I did also want to know another hot topic. I'm really trying to push it to the edge here. I noticed that you don't have a "the" at the beginning of the name, and what do you have against the?
Ooh, I need a little bit more of an intro there for me to come up with something really clever. But what I can say is, if you don't need it, you don't need it.
Are you trying to say that the Glenlivet and the Balvenie, they're just a bunch of posers and they throw that "the" in there just to
No, I would never cast aspersions, even if I just cast aspersions. No. There's There's no real reason. Glenfiddich. So Glen means valley. Fiddick means deer. So Glen of the Fiddick, Valley of the Deer. We do call it the Valley of the Deer, not Valley of the Deer. So I think it's just kind of over time how it's happened. I still call it the Glenfiddich Distillery. So we're not anti the. We're just not the dependent.
I got it. It totally makes sense. It's I'm not gonna go. I want to be welcome if I ever visit Scotland, so I'm just gonna shut my mouth. This is delicious, by the way.
Are your sales low in Columbus, Ohio? Because Columbus, they like stuff. So I'm curious if they go for a different Scotch.
I haven't broken down Ohio as a market lately, so I have to plead ignorance. But I'll get back to you, gentlemen.
All right, we're starting to go off the rails, so I'll say one last question from everybody. John, do you have anything else?
I'm good. I'm fine. This has been awesome.
John is tapped out. Jeff Solomon.
Yeah, what's up with these boxes that Scotch comes in?
Great question. So first of all, the ones that Glenfiddich has are obviously suited to fit the shape of our bottle. The triangle with the 3 points, which, if you're feeling romantic, represents the air, the water, and the barley of Scotland. That gives it its flavor. Definitely had nothing to do with the fact that you could fit more bottles in the case. Definitely not true. Actually, I've been telling that joke like it was true. I just found out recently it's not true. But Scotch whiskey is a spirit that has really been known for gift giving, and so Glenfiddich was actually the first to create these we call them tins, even though they're made of cardboard, but these tins, these external packages, really to make them seem more special for when you want to give one as a gift. It's kind of the simple answer, yeah.
I do have a Scotch that's in a tin. I guess it's from the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society in Great Britain. It's an old Rosabank bottle. So, yeah, that's tasty stuff.
Well, and then afterwards you can put your weed in there, so it's all.
No, my mementos from different places that I go.
All right,
little stones, dried flowers.
Allan, is there anything we've missed as part of the conversation? Anything that you want to get out to our listeners that we may not have asked you about?
I don't think so. I mean, we talked so much about kind of the distillery and kind of where it is and the family that's helped make it what it is today. The only thing I actually want to mention is, since it's here and you brought it up, the Glenfiddich Grand Cru, is that bottle that's around $300. It's finished in cuvee casks that come from France. And it's one of the kind of, I would say, relatively rare Glenfiddichs that is finished in wine casks. And, it's not just a beautiful bottle, but a really kind of beautiful whiskey. So these are the barrels that are actually used for the fermentation, the first fermentation of a wine. And it's spend some time on the lees, and then when we get those barrels, they're still basically wet casks. And so it gives this expression, not just the maturity of a 23-year-old single malt from Glenfiddich, but kind of like a nice brioche richness as well from those casks. And really, anytime you're doing a secondary maturation in a lower ABV vessel, like a wine cask compared to a whiskey cask, you get a different set of flavors left over in the oak. And really just kind of another example of that experimentation that we try at Glenfiddich. We obviously we hope that they're all successful, and this one obviously was. So it's not part of the experimental series, but just a really beautiful expression that we're quite proud of. So I felt like I want to mention that. Yeah,
you just wanted to throw that in our faces.
That's a tune-up for my pickup truck right there.
we're not going anywhere these days. I'm saying it's like, you know.
Yeah, dude. When's the last time you filled up your gas tank? Come on.
I put
Or
5,000
split
miles
it with three
on my
friends,
truck
you know?
looking for rattlesnakes in the last month and a half.
All right. That was awesome. Thank you for sitting down to talk to us. You're off what we for some reason call the hot seat. I don't think we really
The lukewarm.
a seat. But we've got a little bit of time. If you want to stick around, we might talk about a little bit of news here.
For sure. I'm up for it.
All right, let's do it. Let's get into the hard hitting news. We discuss interesting, noteworthy, or sometimes some pretty stupid things. Not tonight. I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but the EU is making a move on requiring wine producers to list the ingredients on the labels of their wine. This has been something that's been talked about. It's always kind of a pie in the sky kind of theoretical discussion, but it looks like this is going to be happening in wines coming out of the EU. There's still a lot of debate over what is required to be on the label. So, for instance, if they use fish bladder as a refining agent, do they have to list that if it's not in the wine? So an interesting topic that I thought we might throw around on the show. Jeff, I'll start with you as a recovering wine blogger. What are your thoughts on the EU doing this and potentially this making its way into the US and beyond?
Well, it's funny when a topic like this comes up, the first thing I think about was I remember when Ridge Vineyards in California started putting ingredients on their labels, and I thought it was just so refreshing. And they did this specifically as kind of like a shot at the bow of so many like supermarket brands that are putting in stuff that you wouldn't really think of with wine. I don't even know if I think those of us that know enough about wine know that things like isinglass are often used, so it's not as shocking. And so I don't know if the typical wine consumer would even care whether or not fish bladders were used. But I think a lot of folks would care when it comes to stuff like mega purple, right? When it comes to adjuncts being used in wine, because we often think of this as like such a natural product. I have this expectation that in Europe, and maybe it's just the way that we as Americans kind of look at old school producers, I have this feeling like they're not going to shoot the shit, right? Like in Europe, it wasn't margarine pink for a long time because they just didn't want people to get them confused. And so certainly like, I don't think that they would necessarily be playing around when it came to labels and stuff like that. My fear is like if something like that was enacted in the United States, what happens when people start lobbying where they go, well, it's not mega purple, it's natural flavors and natural colors. And what happens with that type of labeling, I think is the part that just kind of makes it all feel gross. Because if those are things that end up on labels, it's like, why even bother?
And the interesting part I found about it was really like around chaptalization. And if you don't know, chaptalization is when they'll add sugar to the must before they add yeast to up the alcohol percentage at the end. So there's no sugar in the final product, but yet they're adding sugar to the mix, if you will. And so should sugar be labeled? And to me, it's really what's in the final product. So I don't think they would need to. My opinion is they wouldn't have to list added sugar because then they might think they're getting like a sippy a fruit drink or something like that. Allan, what are your thoughts on this? Specifically to the wine, but also to any alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting topic. When you mentioned fish bladders, I was like, what happened to making wine from grapes? So I felt like that was really working for us. So I mean, I don't know. I operate from a really safe space, right? The only ingredients that you can use to make single malt Scotch whiskey are water, yeast, and malted barley. That's it. So we don't have any sort of could really. There is the possibility. Actually, you can use very very small amounts of coloring if you want, but it's tiny quantities. But there is an interesting and parallel debate in the Scotch whiskey world, which is declaring how much different, I would say, whiskeys you have in a blend, some people really believe that you should be able to say, hey, I've got X proportion from this distillery, X proportion from that distillery, and really break down the DNA. Compass Box whiskey really carries that flag. It's just a debate that's been going back and forth, transparency versus sort of necessity. And, it really seemed that the reason why there's not more favor for that in the industry is that some of the larger blends will never have the same access to the same casks year on year. And one of the great glories of making a blended Scotch whiskey, which has both many single malt components and several grain whiskey components, is that the master blenders that put them together are able to achieve exactly the same flavor profile, even when they don't have the same constituent liquid available year to year. And it would just be incredibly onerous to keep track of every single one. And consumers would start to say, hey, is this one different? Because in reality, it's not. And so there is a parallel debate here, which I think is kind of interesting, right? It's like if a wine is, I don't know much about chapitalization, but I'm guessing that some wines are like lightly chapitalized, and you wouldn't throw it out because of that, but maybe you would. I don't know.
It really has to do with like how ripe the grapes are when you pick them. If their sugar level is at a level that can get to the percentage of alcohol that you want. So right. If you went through full fermentation and would only get to 9% ABV, you throw in some sugar and you're able to get it up to 11% ABV. That's really its purpose.
I mean, I only drink natural wine, so I don't. This is not relevant for me.
John?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what they designate as whether it goes into the making of it or is in the final product. Mm-hmm. I mean, most brewers use an anti-foaming agent so you don't boil stuff out of the pot while it's brewing. But that's not in the final product. That's all absorbed by the yeast, which is taken out by the fining agents we put in the beer, biofine, which is made from tree bark, and it goes in and it precipitates all the yeast out before I keg it. So that's not in the beer. There is a little bit of yeast left in the beer regardless. It doesn't all settle out. So, that kind of stuff. The other thing is, it's interesting to Allan's point. As a brewer, it's consistently excellent is the goal, but consistent the same taste is not always the goal. It's cool as a craft brewer to have certain batches that it has all the characters of the hardest beer that I make, and we sell a lot of it, is the Irish Red. It's by the ingredients you'd say, well, damn, it's the same recipe. It's pretty simple. You've got four colors of barley in there. You've got one hop. You've got one yeast. But it turns out differently every time within a pretty narrow range. But sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's excellent. So that's the cool thing about craft beer. Is like, man, hey, John, that was a really great run of honey pale ale this last time around. I said, yeah, wasn't it? That's pretty cool. As long as when they come back, it's the next batch, it still has the same characteristics. I know when you're spending $140 for a bottle of Johnny Walker Black that you want it to taste the same every single time. But that's kind of a shame, right? Because Alan's talking about these different constituents, and you want excellence, but not always the same excellence. It's nice to well, the 2020 Johnny Walker Black blend was really super good. And then that creates a secondary market, right? That creates a collector's market down the road. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to that.
All right. Good points. Good points. Yeah. And to me, the big thing here is you really see the difference between like Jeff was saying, between the mass produced stuff and the more craft stuff. You need a lot more label space for some of those mega purples and high additive wines. So
there's no mega purple in my Gruet Brut Rosé.
Oh, there's not. All right. Well, if John's flashing his Gruet, it must be
last call.
Last call.
Last call. Time to clean house and lock the doors. You know what we do here, folks. We're looking for a little bit of help from you. John Ruyak, if the folks want to follow us on the social media platforms, where can they do so?
Well, we've got Twitter, Instagram, and our private Facebook group known as Tavern. So that's Twitter. We Like Drinking 1, the numeral 1. Instagram, We Like Drinking, and the cool private Facebook group, The Tavern. That's welikedrinking.com/tavern. That's where the cool kids hang out.
Alan, once again, remind our listeners the best places to find you and Glenfiddich on the social media spaces.
Great, thank you. So the best place to find Glenfiddich, so Glenfiddich US, and to find me, it's Glenfiddich AR.
And those are both on Instagram, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you on any of the others, or Instagram's primarily where you hang out?
These days, yes, exclusively. No, I'm on Facebook as Allan Roth. And I like to be in touch with fellow single malt Scotch whiskey drinkers. So come find me there. It's ALLAN.
All right, Jeff Solomon. If folks have some thoughts on the show, where can they go leave a review?
Yeah, if you have thoughts about whether or not the should be put at the front of single malt Scotch, how do you feel about tins? What are they doing to this guy named Pete? We all want to know. So whatever app you're using to listen to us right now, it's probably Apple Podcasts. Just go ahead and fill up those big fat 5 stars and let us know how awesome we are. And let Pete go. Just let him go.
If you've done all that and you'd like to do more, consider becoming a patron of the show. Visit welikedrinking.com/pledge to find out how you can help support the show and keep the lights on and the Glenfiddich rolling into Jeff Solomon's house for as little as $1 a month. You can also find the show notes for this episode with all the links to the stories or mentions we had at welikedrinking.com/episodes. All right, folks, we've gotten there. We've reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
Okay, folks, through our journey, we've introduced you to high-end beer, Russian Imperial Stouts. We've introduced you to high-end red wines, Cabernets, Pinot Noirs, the whites, the Albariños. We've had the bourbons on. We all know you like the Añejo, but don't be afraid to step up to the big leagues, folks. Scotch. Just do it.
Just say yes.
Just say yes.
Jeff
and learn how to play the bagpipes.
So, for those of you that are friends with me on Facebook, and by the way, if I don't know you, don't try to add me. But those of you that are friends with me on Facebook, you'll see that since the lockdown, occasionally I will just post songs that make me happy, and I'm super excited because while we were recording, I was doing a little research, and Dufftown actually has a new jam out. Cut the music. Come, my lady. Come, my lady. You're my butterfly. Sugar, baby. Again. Bring it back.
Did you mean you were doing some research during the show? Were you not fully engaged?
Just got called out.
John, I made
Yes.
this whole... Dufftown isn't a band.
Oh,
It's a joke.
my bad.
Allan,
And Crazy Town's a joke too. F that bit with the tattoos that fly off of their bodies in that video. The corniest shit I've ever seen in my life. Sorry.
Allan, any final thoughts? We've already cut everybody else off, but any final thoughts before we let you get out of here?
Well, first of all, this has been an absolute pleasure. I was told it was going to be fun, but not this much fun. But actually, talking about music and Dufftown, I don't know, I can't remember what day it is. Every Friday or every Wednesday, there's a ceilidh, which is basically Gaelic for what we would call a square dance. And one of my best nights out at the Dufftown ceilidh was so much fun. It was all the Glenfiddich ambassadors, and we're dancing with all the folks that live in Dufftown. And they closed with this incredible song that was "Come, come, my lady, come, my lady." No. So it was just amazing to hear it again for the first time outside of Scotland. So just cheers on your global, international musical tastes. Spectacular. I never thought I'd hear that song from an American's mouth.
That's fantastic. Allan, it was an absolute pleasure having you on your show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to come sit down with us three buffoons to introduce us to Glenfiddich and educate us on so much stuff. It was awesome having you on the show.
Cheers, my pleasure. I'll be the fourth buffoon anytime.
Excellent, awesome. And with that, I'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast.
Where you'll never drink alone.
My monitor is like extra far away. Like I really had to reach for it tonight.
You dislocate your shoulder in order to get it there?
I may have pulled a lat or something like that.
That's cool. I mean, I'm all up in it on my monitor. I'm always pulling my punches. One of these days, I'm going to be angry and I'm just going to just go through. It'll happen.
Just going to throw the punches.
Yeah.
Rhett is
Like the Kool-Aid guy. Oh, yeah. Coming through our screen.
Rhett is
Rhett says set Pete free. Hashtag set Pete free.
we're going to start a whole thing, aren't we? We're going to start a whole thing. Solomon. Chug, did you finish the bottle, John? I knew you would. I knew you're like, I won't finish this bottle. It's like, come on, John. You're our pro drinker on the show. There's never been a bottle you haven't been able to kill. All right. Allan, that was awesome. Thank you so much. YouTube. Oh, dude. All y'all on YouTube. I don't even know if you're listening to us anymore, or if you're just all having your own side conversations about oil prices and
gun control.
What are you planting in your garden this week, guys? Sorry, I just alienated our biggest fans. Sorry, everybody.
Solomon. Christ. YouTube, it was awesome having you here. Set Pete free, hashtag set Pete free. Look for it. Coming out Friday. So talk to you all later. Good seeing y'all.
Love you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Ethel says sort of.